Hey there, this is Greg. I've got some things to share because playing with large language models, specifically OpenAI's, and some of the models that you can run on your very own machine from Hugging Face and other sources has just changed everything. It's just so amazing. So I feel that by being several weeks late to the party, several weeks before GPT-4 was released, before I even knew this stuff was going on. Doesn't seem to be very late, but in the singularity times, it is a really big deal. So, anyway, I've been doing a lot of little small coding projects just in curl and Emacs org mode and Python and Jupyter notebooks and so forth. And it's really cool. But one thing that a YouTuber named Dave Shapiro came up with recently is this great idea of a knowledge base generator and heuristic searcher. It is so great. This whole thing with language models, there was a Redditor I saw recently whilst I was still using Reddit. Um, it was a good 11-year run. But anyway, he said, for 50 years, generative AI or a certain branch of AI has been striving to get something that could conceivably pass the Turing test, where you don't know for sure that your interlocutor on the other side of the line is not a human. Um, and then a few months ago, we woke up and found that the Turing test had been blasted into the sun. It is now also not within sight, as it had been over those 50 years, but now it's uh, looking over your shoulder that it's not in sight. So it's really that amazing. And when you say there are emergent properties like reasoning and so forth, that means not designed, and that's quite astonishing. Anyway, let's take a look at what we're going to do. I've got a GitHub repo. You got to know what a GitHub repo is. Maybe. This is coding stuff, so I'm going to assume a certain level of knowledge here. We are not using Jupyter Notebooks. David Shapiro, thank you very much, did not use Jupyter Notebooks. Instead, we have straight, easy Python code and text files that we can version control and keep clean, and it's much nicer. And if you want to put it into a notebook or put it into a web service, have at it. I'm probably going to be doing one of those things very soon myself. So the idea is that we give the chatbot a large chunk of text. That's some sort of thing that needs a little bit of digesting to understand, and have it turn into a structured format for a knowledge base article. Now, the first thing I'm going to do to utilize this code is I'm going to activate a virtual environment. Fret not if you are not an Emacs person. This is not an Emacs required thing necessarily, but if you're on your own system, you will activate your virtual environment however you do it. Virtual environments were always a good idea. Now they're really required, so get with the program here. My virtual environments are listed here when I use the PyVenv package. I'm going to choose this LangChain one that has OpenAI, LangChain, and some other really relevant things for working with large language models installed in it. And indeed, it tells me I am now using that. And if I get a shell, I will see that yes, indeed, I'm in that virtual environment. So going to my clone of that repository, I will say, let's see, you should probably, let's big up the text a little bit for presentation mode. I've got this, basically everything happens in this KB microservice.py. One thing I want to point out again that I'm not sure I got to is that on my GitHub organization called Gregory G, or user Gregory G, I've got a repo called KB microservice, which is a fork of Dave Shapiro's microservice with my own branch called org mode KB. That's my contribution to society, is to put everything in org mode. Okay, so the code is, basically there's a couple things. It imports Beautiful Soup in order to slurp text off of web pages, which is something that I added to the code. And then I got rid of stuff that was in YAML. Dave's original stuff was, formatting into YAML. And instead, put this lovely org parse library in, which does a very good job of the basics of parsing org mode, which is a very difficult, it's a very difficult thing to parse. And then I'm kind of keeping track of models that I have used with success in this. You can switch models as you between invocations of the functions. And then this get text from URL is simply a helper thing. This is when you do have a URL, it goes through and gets the text from the body of the content, strips all CSS, HTML, other markup out of it, and then just returns the cleaned up text. And in fact, I did not write this one. This one was purely written by ChatGPT. I asked it for something that would do that, and it responded with something that worked first time, so there you go. The chatbot is, if you're familiar with using OpenAI's APIs, you will see that this is a chat completion API where you pass the model messages, which is your whole history of conversation, which is how ChatGPT in the browser maintains memory of what you've chatted about, and then temperature. In this case, messages is simply a way to format the prompt that we give it and the text that we give it. It's not a chatty thing. It's not going to have memory. We're not doing that. Although it would be really easy to add that if there were an iterative process to making knowledge base articles that we wanted to take advantage of, for example. And it returns the text, the number of tokens used, and the model used. And then the big thing that we'll start with is this create article. It's so great. Basically, the code, there's hardly any Python code in here. So where's all this code coming from? We're asking something to go through and crunch through a whole set of text, figure out semantic meaning, figure out keywords that can be used, and so forth. It's not here. It's all elsewhere. Why? Because, as Andre Kaparthi recently tweeted, the hottest new programming language is English. And this went wild. He did the follow-up to this tweet that he put in is well worth checking out. He went into a lot of things that are related to that simple statement, and it's marvelous. So I don't always go to Twitter, but when I do, I check out Andre Kaparthi. All right, so create article is where we'll be spending our time to begin with, and then we'll touch on a couple of the others. It's sending the prompt, which is in this file called systemcreate.txt. Let's take a look at that. Okay, the prompt is, you have a main purpose. What is my purpose? You pass butter. You are a chatbot tasked with passing butter or creating a KB article based on user input. Your output must be only an org mode document with the title, description, file tags, and body. Input may vary, etc., etc. Focus on topical and declarative information. This is a Dave Shapiro thing, not really a me thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep that. Then the org mode template, rather than YAML template, looks like this. It has a property tag or format to indicate a property, and that's title, and then we'll fill it in with title. Title should be short. The original prompt said it should contain only characters that can be part of a file name. I don't worry about that because I rename the file that it generates anyway with an org mode package that I use, which we'll see soon. File tags, which are simple strings delimited with colons, denoting terms and concepts to help identify the article. So these are our categories. Categories, hashtags, whatever. And then, as I realized, as the language model is chunking through this, it might recognize that there are authors. So when that's the case, add the author or authors delimited with colons or unknown. And that's a super cool thing that I found. So now I can search by related authors as well. And then the title, which is a level 1 heading repeating the title, right? Title and title, but this time prefixed with asterisk space, flush to the left. So that's an org mode heading. And then a description, which should be optimized for word economy. It should be succinct. Should be optimized for word economy, succinct. Conveying detail with relatively few words, okay? And then the body of the article to be kept under 1,000 words. I had gotten rid of that at one point and then put it right back in because you hit token limits possibly with some generation of things. So, and then that's basically all there is to it. That is our program, entirely written in English to create knowledge base articles. The knowledge base articles will be saved to a directory called KB with these very long file names that are consistent with the Denote package, which is kind of a Zettelkasten light. So it's kind of an org roam or a roam research light way of capturing notes, turning things in quickly into to-do lists, tasks, research projects, reading lists, and just knowledge out there that's searchable in text. All right, so we're going to add to that with this specific type of format. All right, so with no further ado, let's get a Python environment, a REPL. So I do that. You would do that on a system not using Emacs by using IPython. So pip install IPython, you'll be able to do the same thing. And then I'm going to go into the code and load the code into my IPython shell. I can say, oh yes, there is a create article and a chatbot function now, so it is all indeed loaded up correctly. So now for the fun. I'm going to find some text to create an article out of. Let's see, I've been going to a site called Explorers Foundation lately. You see the purple links here. I'm kind of interested in finding an article that's fairly long but not too long. So I think this one is probably a good one. Erasmus, Reasonable Discourse. Let's see, let's grab that, go back to my Python buffer and say that's what we'll use. So what I'm going to do is invoke that create article function. I'm going to give it a URL parameter. So if I can either give it text just in the first position in a quoted string or text equal. But if I provide a URL, then it will use that. It will use the function that we saw earlier to slurp up the content from there. And then it's going to go to a KB directory where I have these very long file names that's related to the Denote package in Emacs, which is my Zettelkasten light or Roam Research light method of capturing ideas, turning them quickly into tasks, reading lists, research projects, and so forth. So this will just dovetail into that, and I can see that it just popped a new article in. If we go back to the Python buffer, it will say it created knowledge base, Erasmus Vortex, Explorers Foundation Research and Investment. I'm not sure that's the best title, but we'll see. But it did not give that in the title here. The reason is because the Python code doesn't know how to turn it into a denote type of file name. Instead, what I do is I bring it up and I say denote rename file using front matter, and then it creates that very long name, and everyone's happy. So let's see what it did. It looks pretty good. So my added metadata to the org mode is to give it a source, which will either be user or the URL that I gave. Identifier I'm not using, but could be used in the future with the denote package. Creation timestamp. The model that was used, setup file, is just for formatting exports. I can turn this into a web page or a PDF, and that'll help format it. This is the title and file tags and author. It did not determine the author from there. I happen to know this. The author is the owner of that website named Leif Smith, but doesn't often toot his own horn, so we don't know that it's him writing this. Okay, let's word wrap some of this. A comprehensive overview of the Erasmus Vortex, a research and investment domain of the Explorers Foundation. Focuses on the importance of rational discourse, skepticism, and the exploration of various controversial topics. Amen to that. I'm pleased to see that it created subtopics and lists as I asked it to, and gives a description and then details, because this is not like subtopics that are, it's not very deep. That article wasn't a long thing to summarize, so I think this one is just perfect for it. Let's see. And then actually, if I really were to use correct list format, it would not look quite like this. Although that works for org, that works for org. So we're good. And then it even did a sublist here. So we have subtopics, and then within a given subtopic, we even have a sublist. So that's pretty cool. All right. Now, there's another function that we will use called update directory. And all that does is it runs very quickly. It looks through the file names, since the file names themselves have so much metadata in it, that, and then it builds something called directory.txt, which is a list of all the files in that directory with their file name, their title, their description, so that short description, and then the keywords or file tags that were included in that. And with that, we can simply feed this file to a search function, which is another kind of mind blower when you think about it as to what it does. So search KB, or the search, basically it looks exactly like the create article, except that it's not writing a file at the end. It is returning JSON, and the only thing that's really different is the programming. Oh, that programming that's in English. So let's see what the English programming for search is. This is just a killer here. Okay, return the relevant KB articles to a search query. You'll be given a chat message from the user. This chat message is actually the search query itself. Your only point is to return a JSON list of relevant KB article file names in descending order of relevance. Think in steps about relating similar concepts to find relevant matches. Return a JSON list object and nothing else. Now, what kills me about this is that I'm not telling it what relevant is to me. I'm not telling it how to even determine relevancy. This is like the centuries, probably centuries, of users coming to programmers or developers or architects or designers in earlier times and saying, I need you to make this thing that does what I want. And the programmer always, I know it from the programmer side, you say, we're going to need to really drill into detail over several sessions. And they're like, oh, don't make me think, why can't it just do what I want it to do? And now we get to do that to language models. We get to do that to chatbots, and we'll see what the results are like. Okay, back to the Python REPL. We're going to say search KB. Let's look for economic development. You could give a whole paragraph here, and it's all the same to the chatbot. And it will search for relevant results, whatever relevant means to the chatbot. Okay, so let's see what it returned. Something called from the Vortex Cheetah, from another Vortex on that site. Entrepreneurial, Africa, entrepreneurship, development, economics. Well, that certainly sounds relevant to economic development. Man, Economy, and State, a book on economics by Ludwig von Mises and possibly Murray Rothbard. So you've got Hayek, Mises, Rothbard, all the classics, and the Austrian economists. Man, Economy, and State by Murray Rothbard. And that appears to be a different one, or maybe it's the same one, but I did generate multiple knowledge base articles from the same text with different models, different temperatures, see what it does, slightly different prompts. And then Freedom's Ugly Duckling, Private Property in Land, Economics Land History. Very nice. Okay, so I think that was wildly successful, and I didn't have to bother telling it what I think is relevant. But if I want to, I can tweak that prompt, and that's a good goal for the future. So for the future, Shapiro initially had this set to be a web service that you could call. So you call it as an API. And I ripped all that out. I'm probably going to put it right back in because it's really actually very useful. But we've already got basically the same thing happening with slightly different prompts to get different results. So why not say what I want is a list of things to do based on what the text I'm giving you, or add it to my reading list, or do something else that works with this kind of a Rome Zettelkasten workflow. And that's kind of my next steps with this, and I will be updating that one branch, that org mode KB branch, in my fork of the repository. And then just playing with all this stuff is increasingly giving me a backlog of cool things to code and then blog about. So I hope to see you in the next one, and I hope that this one was entertaining and instructive and even maybe a little bit inspiring. This stuff is wild cool, so I'll catch you in the next one.